destroyer, the glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Remember.
Jigson
Maya. Maya, college is so I'll do that. Oh, yeah, Nick, Kanshi section song by it can have the Balana me. Our attention temperature section tomba de la de. Oh, yeah, Takas or changing the Kulon de Jokodua. In the trade the cookers over. Don't see Woodua. Joe Mambula Pemba, Joe Mambula Derrichers, Church at the Sendele Deva, Joe Chima Pengelia, Pemba. 제붕원에 심하게 저 어쩌래 고도와
거기도
어야야는 그래서 대선자 가르쳐 그래 고로데 센델리아 드네 가르쳐 그래 랑게 면에 채널이야 펜도 채널나 강채널 같이 맨날 처음에 제일 선발이 저 담보를 대도와 근데 제ben에 센델을 랑라 펜 샤라 펜 지대 심을이야 남이 저부야 분용 거라 지나시 아니 센델이야 가르쳐 그래 이와 심마 소소를 랑화 매봐 기시 찍네 찍도 규대 코르데야 될 코라스요라 델레 타레 ton달에 대 규이 소도 녀모로 봐 네 콘도 당ар 제당아 삼삼 소소마도 삼유맹게르치 로 아니 마제당 차도당 전심당 통중당 진짜 녀모도죠 코아코시게 규소대로 대송다 니리 메세나리아 콘도 당아제 차도 전심을 써봐 용용치기 매기와 지기 삼삼 삼로치 땅으로와 대체는 타르베 사베샤그로와 근데 대자 많이 봐 라치부 대화당 라치부 교와 통만 매번에 소시부 삼로당대로와 대당들이 고개마도 용해 매디 다들의 삼로 자체로 당체로와 근데 동해대 저와도 심지어 탐제 동해대 저야다 더두지 대화랑 거에 치도 나라게 때는 네가 요소 속에 거네 강단 저와 여바 강단 고급 총어들이야 펜도 지내봐 교육시 연대 군대 랑도르네 탐지시에서 오라 랑도르네 탐지시에 교육시 연대 군대 진주와 저기 인삼 애는 예린 메시나리아 그 나리나 파파에 탑시체 연대 나리나라가 줄라 기회 탑시체 오라 진짜 꿀로 디세 때문에 대대비 람데 소리하게 대바다 삼바다 꼼바 림지 저기 인삼 꿀로 야보체 삼을 당시에 세나 나란도 취시해야 돼 먼저 라미 고방 탑지다 타바 탑지다 탐지 김부 탑지 줄로 요라 근데 줄로야 그런 세 때문에 sembarshus야
So, to begin with, Geshe made the praise to the Buddha who has seen and taught this dependent origination, and by teaching it to us, it is what allows us to as well achieve peace. And so, in a sutra, it describes this dharma. The dharma is what brings benefit and happiness to beings. So, the dharma is what is able to bring us benefit and happiness both to ourselves and others, not just in this life, but in future lives. If we have this kind of an understanding that we aren't going to cause harm to any other beings, and we're going to, as much as we are able to, bring them benefit, do positive sorts of actions, this will be beneficial to ourselves and those around us, as well as planting the kinds of seeds for taking a good rebirth in the future. But looking at this process of rebirth, of uncontrollably taking body after body without any sort of control, we see that the root of all of this is our afflictive emotions, our kind of grasping at a self, our sense of anger and competitiveness, jealousy and pride, and so forth. And so recognizing that if we are to eliminate those kinds of afflictions that cause us to take such uncontrolled rebirth, we can get out of that cycle of suffering. And so making the kind of effort to eliminate our afflictions with this sort of a goal is the level of a being of middling capacity. And then recognizing that it's not really suitable to just think about ourselves, that it isn't just us who is in this cycle of taking uncontrolled rebirth, but rather it's all sentient beings. And so seeing that, we give rise to an attitude of wanting to gain a state in which we have eliminated all of our faults and developed all good qualities, such that we have the knowledge of all the points of what is to be adopted and what is to be abandoned in order to be able to bring benefit to others. And so with that kind of motivation, we should on a daily basis strive to eliminate all of the various faults that we have and try to develop each good quality. And the ability to do that is dependent upon listening to the Dharma. So we should set a good motivation, thinking that we are listening to this Dharma, maybe for a good rebirth in the future, or to be able to attain liberation, or for the state of Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. And that kind of a motivation will create the causes for such a result to come about.
Oh yeah, no, don't do shit. Don't do something daily to you. 딱봐 특수지바 단다 공도야 로사로 딱봐 딱배 특수세로서 저 딱봐서데 지다고 계지게 주던 깽게 왕게 라리안 주아 주던 깽게 왕게 라파 내야들이야 편도 제메고바 내 통계시네 고 딱봐서라 마도 딱봐를 시에뱅게 bak해요 말에 뒤때도 땡게게 고 말에 그런 거 주디사 뭐 주바데 주던 깽게 왕거 내가 치고 매나 내 딱봐서라 지고 그제 되네 때 마도 뒤딱도 땡게 땡게 고 말아 딱봐서 메타바스도 계지 봐 그다음 땡겨왕게 계지를 랑게 어디 네트워크 친게데 랑게 뭐이 괜디마 그 튜제 대토에 그다음 땡기 상황전에 도구야 될 메타바스요라 어디든 알아서 메타바라고 떠서도 무슨 통고도 와 민드시네 켄로 신드시네 메도이나 그런 주원도데 라바데다 하고도 와 이나티 계지를 주원도요 홉티칼레 뒤직도 주어게 놓요 말아 차에다 받은 거라 쓰기 말아 어디 계셔라 야 어디 질러셔나 좀 됩다 뭐
So here, as far as where we have arrived in the text, this is on page 69 in the English. And here we're talking about the distinctions between the words takpa and tersuk. And so here, the word takpa, which we usually translate as impermanent, is not so much something remaining forever as thinking about it as being established by its own essence. So if something is takpa, as a permanent, it is not benefited or harmed by causes and conditions. Being that it is established in its own essence, it remains that way without being dependent in any way on causes and conditions. And this is opposed to things which are impermanent in the sense that they are dependent upon causes and conditions. So the continuity of something impermanent can continue for a long time, but it is dependent upon that momentary accumulation or aggregation of causes and conditions. And so when it comes to understanding impermanence, we can see a kind of coarse impermanence, that things change, like that tree gets bigger or we get older or flowers rot, whatever it may be. But that kind of momentariness, that subtle impermanence of things changing moment to moment, we are unable to apprehend that.
Oh yeah. 어디 이거 랑외네 주바 랑왕도 주바시고라 랑외네 랑게 뭐 여밤 랑외네 랑신기 여반 대신나 그 주로 매바 딱바 인고 요래 주로 매바 신고래 소주단 깨는데 현달에 뜻인데 그 뭐게 주고 요 말아 기린데 그 딱바를 주고 그래서 랑외네 주바 얘나야 딱바 인고 요래 뒤인데 삼삼이야 랑외네 주바라야 딱바다 텐데 따와들 딱타 서버 텐데 송고라 딱바 딱타 서버 딱타 통세 딱바 따와 서버 텐데 송고래 텐데 딜에 탄데 티가서 딱바다 필수 제바 세더라 필수세 딱바 세더다 참장이야 야마디 만유르세 탄다 주진왕이 주어 마십세 탄데 대대는 딱바를 되어라 필수세야 딱바래 거야요야 참장이야 단다 여버데 마음발이야 주진을 때 먹어 주고 내 동배들 들수 있을 거지요라 야 어디 질럽잖아
So here, sometimes this word takpa, which is really permanent, if something is like objectively established, is inherently established or established from its own side, then it is something that is unchanging in the sense that it doesn't depend upon causes and conditions. If it has that kind of inherent existence, then it is something which is unchanging. So we often see this term permanent applied to that kind of a view and to that extreme of permanence when we hold to things as though they are enduring or kind of unchanging. So permanent in this term Thakpa can also have the sense of something that in the present did not depend upon causes and conditions. It is sort of permanent in the sense that its essence, its nature is already established, and therefore its existence is not dependent upon anything else. Whereas this term tersuk can have the sense of being something that is enduring, looking to the future. It will remain, not being dependent or benefited or harmed by various causes and conditions. So sometimes these can be synonymous, and sometimes there's more of that sense of one referring to the past and one more referring to the future.
Oh yeah. Takpa tirsu cheba ase. Kote chikbe wandu cheba ine ko jura meba la kocha ures, niga takpa la kocha ures kora. Jura meba la seshes. Kam diri se tanda taan dilia kondo dona sungbe takpa tirsu senge tesi kora. Kam diri chu nam rangshin ki tuba ran nangshin shenba la takpa tirsu do sunga ase. Tanda kondo sunga ki dona sunga takpa tirsu sete. Chu nam rangshin ki tuba na nawa dado rangshin ki tuba zimba tilia. Ane zimba la nangshin shenba la takpa tirsu do sunga ase. Takpa tirsu do sunga ase rangshin ki tuba nawa dado rangwane yoba zimba tilia takpa tirsu do sunga sunga resi ora. She songba yinshin se. Tenga chu nam rangshin ki yo na yurme do neba she kuwa se. Rangwane tuba rangshin ki tuba yena ko yuwa menge ene tsuktuk to neba she kuwa ra. Te kuwa ene tila takwa asa sunga resi. Tetar songba yinshin se. Tenga chu nam rangshin ki yoba la takta se doa. Chu nam rangshin ki yoba tila takta, takwe tala. Tetar tawa tila takta la longa, takbar tawa se da. Tetar tawa la takta, she songba tabu yin se. Ya tiba to chilabna.
So here, picking up in the text, it says the Tibetan words takpa and tersuk sometimes have the same meaning and sometimes have a different meaning. So when synonymous, these two both mean unchanging. In the context of this sutra citation, the Buddha uses the phrase apprehending phenomena as permanent and enduring. So here, this is again sort of glossing the sutra passage that we had above. This is being used in the sense of in reference to phenomena appearing to be inherently established and then apprehending them to be so. So in the context of using these words for phenomena having some sort of inherent existence, if they had that sort of inherent existence, they would be unchanging, as in permanent and enduring. And this is referring particularly to them appearing to be inherently established and then apprehending them to be so. The Buddha made this statement because once phenomena exist inherently, they must remain without changing. And so here, again, if they had some sort of inherent existence, phenomena would not be subject to any kind of change. It is as if the Buddha first explained that the extreme of permanence refers to phenomena existing inherently, and then said that the view of permanence refers to this extreme.
Yang kap gala sigura, shungi kap gashi liya. Ngar ju chutin juwa meba tata neba tala takba asira. Ani ti ngar ju chutin juwa meba tata neba tala takba asira. Takba tanga. Tade chutin manjur se maung bala nenge chine tirsuus. Hoten riyan koten takba ta tirsu nide so. Koten degu beka ben yore esra. Yotos. Tichilana.
So there are other instances, though, where takpa and tersuk must be interpreted to have different meanings. So this is where takpa, permanent, would refer to a former phenomena abiding in the present without having changed, kind of looking to the past, whereas tersuk refers to a present phenomena remaining in the future without undergoing change. So more a sense of enduring and going forward.
Oh, yeah. The Kongi Dodan Drawer, Padan Dawa Drabe, Shijabe and Debale Yasung Desigua, Kondon do transfer and Dona Karsungursena, Ko Rangwine yo mares, Rangwine yo ba nawati tuna res. Ina chidang ti nawati kanga tuna mare yo res, yuju yo, Rangwine yo ba ti meva mato, meva mare yo res soro. O tina shi paden dawa trapawe, shigeben driba nale song sha sora, tingi le. Kedi se, o di, ngen di na tredile kashi che de sha, injina kandini meshe. Kedi se, desi edi che sha, tela ase, kedi tela ase edi. Mindu kedi rangshi mena se dwa. Kedi tela rangshi mena chishi yo che na se, rangshi ki me se dwa, neta kare yo re se na se gora. Chebari cha de se, o labdi shegi yin so da. Kaan kune nyomu bata nambar chanwe gyuru chebe se, kaan kune nyomu choge, kunju tenpa de tunge tenpa se ro tozu nyomu chote ra. Nambar chanwe chongo dende lamde de kewala sogo tozu chote se gora. Kaan kune nyomu bata nambar chanwe gyuru chebe se de ya, yan di chesha, ngo tenjin drebari chungwa, di se chindwa. Gyuru chebe langs namsan chidwa, di padu, gyuru chebe, gyuru chebe ngo se, tenjin drebari chungwa di yue la se, tenjin drebari chungwa di yue re se. Gyumari chebe, langbu chida, gyuma da, gyuma ki kengi tu chebe langje da mida tindi tuba tuyo ardo, tu chu che. Langbu da, gyumari chebe se di yang che sha. Langbu da, tala sokpa da, drawa te yang chiba, chinji lokpa da ki, rangshin da cheba nge tu yung su to ko se. Gyuma kengi talang raba tindi tuba hine ko tata langbu ngone chi yu ngone du samsa, samgirwa tuyo che. O dinangshi, chu tamze rangshin ki yoba ngara du samgi ware so ra. Phagpa namgini, rangshin ki meba ngusun du si sadi, gyuma da, mi gyula sokpa tarse. Gyuma kengi tiushi tangla tu tu na ko, tangla tu nawa ma tu me samso so haku yora. O gyuma da, mi gyula sokpa tar rangshin meba, ten chi tawa shindu yonsu, Shuto se, Tonto Chugri Kingri series, Shagan Song Sos, Ya Tipotichila.
So here then, in keeping with the sutra passage above, the glorious Chandrakirti states in his commentary on the 400 stanzas. Now here in the quotation that follows, there is a little bit missing from the Tibetan, and I think it may have also been sort of missing from the English. So here, again, the issue arises from the sutra passage quoted above. If there is no inherent existence, then what does exist? If phenomena are not existent from their own side or objectively existent, then are they completely non-existent? And so here the response comes in that they do not exist sort of as they appear. It's not all appearances, however, that are being negated. So the answer says, I will explain. Phenomena that serve as the sources of virtues and afflictions exist. Now here, I think it should be saying that phenomena whose nature are dependent arisings. And here, this is referring to everything that exists on the kind of afflicted side. So the truth of suffering and the truth of the origin of suffering, as well as on the thoroughly purified side. So we often see that translated differently as than virtues. But so all of that which is on the purified and the afflicted side exist with this nature of being dependently originated. They are similar to illusion-like horses, elephants, and so forth. And so I think there's something that's missing from the Tibetan here, but I think it all got into the English. So here, ordinary persons mistakenly understand them to have inherent existence. So like when a magician conjures up illusory horses and elephants, for ordinary beings who don't understand that those are just sort of magical illusions, they hold them to be as they appear. And this is how ordinary persons are. They hold things to have this kind of inherent existence. Whereas noble beings precisely understand them to lack inherent existence and to be like a magician's illusions, a mirage, and so forth. So this is the sort of difference in understanding between those who are ordinary persons and Aryas or noble beings.
Oh yeah, Kondo Doda Tenjule Sumbatar Tatalia Rosara, Rangshingi Me, Yena Yores, Tatish Sebase Shayora. Nakashi Sunju Mendra Shenda Yugodo. Tandamle Chedu Rangshingi Mendra to Tamerese. Tene Tapa some to you, tension revolution some to you. Particularly Yoba Kochu Mares, which you are at Nashimares, Yoba Chawachi to get yours. Rangwin married the tended sober attendants, legacy, this was the Tilia, Koyoba Shaku, Tisugora. Oh, teach election.
So here, as it will continue, just as it is said in the above sutras and commentaries, whatever appears to us, such as the production of phenomena and so forth, appears to exist inherently and from its own side. So there are those who, when they hear that things are not inherently existent, rather than understanding that they're merely existent, they fall into their being totally non-existent. To have that level of conventional existence or merely designated existence, for them it doesn't suffice as existence. And so there are those who then would say that if phenomena are not inherently existent, they don't know how to posit their existence otherwise.
Oh, Kondo Doda Tenjule Sumbatarase. Taja Namlase. Doda Tenjule Sumbanashi. Varazu Tadus and Chutu Rangwine Trubanawadi. Nawanashi Yomares, Ina Jawane Meba Mare, Jawachingaji Yores, Sungura, or Sumbataris, Chunam, Giwaso, Kahanawa Nams, Giwada, Sudratu Rachel Sobakarinawana. Rangshingi Yobada, Rangwine, Yoba Nashi, Tedar Shebaela, Kurangwine, Rangshingi Yoba, Rangwine, Kurangwine to Tuktubarach. Ngarang years and get rich. Garazul Pachashana. Narju Samgidwa, Sobo, the Sem that saw the Pashan, Naranchi, you have no Shakudwa, Rangwine, Angaranga years, Rangwine, Susumuni, Kayomara, Shendal attention, Jen, any tapate, Samla, any Tasta, Kapumba, Kamba, Shagu, Rangwine, Yoba Nashi, Tedar Shemba in last garage. Get the chunam Tajala, Rangwine, Trubana, Tedar Yoba in us. Rangwine Trubana, Nashi Rangwine Yoba ina. Muma Namjishidan Debatar, and Dini Pumbo, Dini Kansaku, she, Tanya Tagwe, Tani, Kanyese. Robuma was over Rangwine years ago. Umaba, Tenjuatabutada, Shashanara, Mubana Rangwine Mesem, the Shachiribada. Number Sanjib to them or sometimes Rangune Yogure. Rangune Senichi Rice Man and never do this Sungora. Oh, Chizati. Chidar Debati Mouth open to Chitterese. Get the Chunum Tajala Rangune Truba. Now at Titar Yoba Yena. Muma Namjachidar Debadar and Dini Pumbos. When Chiruba Dachina Ta the Chen and Yore. Nangitase, about Tirsuchi or Sektas and get it raw. And Yakashe number in a Pumbunga de Tare said, Yakashes and a Mare, Pumbunga Mare, Quinshin Namshis a Simdi, Sim, Yundu dead and a Simchiore. Oh, this Tare said, Chiri Tadis and a Shaviore. And in Kashes and Chiruas and Nangita, the cheetahs, Chichi Tonde del Tase or a stitcher. Nangitase, Nalolia, Nangichivekus, Nalol, Kobe Nalol, you think it's your something to some Gora. Sangadichi Yoko to Mato, Debuyo Maroko, Chiyoko Samgora. Uma Bachene Tindrio Mara. Nangina Tadis, Kobe Nanju Tengris Yomara. A tea on any target. Target Chawach to Labe Chawach, Sober Chawach to Target Chawach Soda. The Kobe Nanju Juting at Tajin, Kulega Kachiyomara. Target Chawach, the Lutanga, the Yida, Simdan Soa, the Dushikanga Chawach, the Target Chawach Shawura. Tidico, Tadi Surgil Ted and Gisuena, Pumbule loss of Chivarani, because Kisu Chawach, the Target Chawach, and Rumara. Tadi Kasital Mambulavi Substantive, yeah. Chidan Deva, Tagweta, Denya Kai, number shed, seven, Dinshi Niju, Ranguna Yona, Takadires, the Taxuba, Chesuba, Tsutuba. Ngadi be Tsutuba, Korankorachi, and Kagres, you did it to us, she tended to the children do to such a Yogura, Mate. Oh, tended your Maresicora. Ranguni Yonit in the Yogure. Ranguni Yomar, Ranguni Yona, Chen in Yegure. Diana da Karine, move condition of Kuchen, Tandirisha says near Yogure. Dini Kansako, she Tanya Tagwete, the Kai, number Chede, Cheves, Kansas, Tashi, to do Chiri Kargare, John said Ming Tagwete, John Kadres, Sena, Tandirisha, Rayesh, Kores, Ranguni Yona. The Chedi near Yomar, Ranguni, Chen near Meta, Ranguni Mares. Tana ko meri beso me mare tene tak batsam sha pumbu nga bu karun tene ta spa ta kore mi tonde sobu da chi tene ming ta ra matina shi tashi tudu John kar sigina pa tene ta pa tagdwa te tsam le sha kore se ora ta din dile ta se sobu le ta mare sem le ta mare tezu chershi chen pa ta sha yora sa tene takwa sigdo tene takwa sam ta sobu ta sem da chowa da tezu lega chebde ta lega chebe shagura ta rugudo tegido nagido kanga shagudo ta singi pe lo su chi yone sobu nana ta nagyo maro o tende dio ma ti kansura chewen di shini ju yego las uma tenju anam jene kedar chewen menye be chunum rangune yobar nawa de tribe nawa Mayimbar Shedo, the Tahi and Roswa, Tonja Sama de Tuna the best, Sama Tuna Mat, then a tribe child or the Matri, Yebe Sashi or the Esover. Ya, Tibet Chilan, months.
So here again, just as it is said in the above sutras and commentaries, whatever appears to us, such as the production of phenomena and so forth, appears to exist inherently and to exist from its own side, and we then apprehend it as such. So as it's explained above in these sutras and the various commentaries, that phenomena appear to us as though they have this kind of objective existence from their own side. And we apprehend them then to have that kind of existence as though they had that sort of inherent or objective existence. So all that appears to us, all of the various forms and sounds and so forth, they appear to have that kind of existence. And as though, even though they appear as though they exist from their own side, in their own right, it's not as though they actually exist in that way. So it says, if a phenomena that appears to us to exist from its own side did indeed exist in this way, then just as the essentialists assert, by examining and searching for the object implied by the conventions, this is an aggregate or this is a person, we would be able to find it and say, this is it. So again, if it were the case that a phenomenon actually existed in the way that they appear to us. We have these appearances of persons and pots and pillars and so forth, and they appear to be sort of objectively existent from their own side. And for the essentialists, so again, this is non-Buddhist schools who assert some sort of like a permanent self, and also those lower tenant holders all the way up to the mind-only school, they would say that we have to have some kind of inherent existence, this intrinsic or inherent existence, that when we search for something, when we say this is the object, one has to be able to find that. So if you try to point out what the self is, I mean, for some non-Buddhists, it's something that is outside of these aggregates, or it could be something that they see as being like within the aggregates. There are Buddhist schools that assert that it's like all 5 of the aggregates, or that it's something like this foundational consciousness that is the self that we can point to and say, yes, that is it. Now, for the Madhyamaka Prasangikas, there is no such thing. Rather, it is a self is something that is merely designated on the basis of the aggregates. For the essentialists, they say if something is merely designated, then how could it function? How could it do anything? But yet, it's only when we see the functioning of our various aggregates, our form and our consciousness and so forth, that we can designate, oh, I'm doing this, or I'm thinking this. It's only on that kind of basis, something being designated on that, that we can speak of its functionality. There's no way for these things to function if they had that kind of objective existence in their own right. But for essentialists, they would say that there's got to be something that we can find, that we can point to, that can withstand analysis. If things exist, we should be able to like point to it and actually say, this is that thing, rather than say when we designate on the basis of the aggregates, like this is Tashi, or this is Tundrup, this is John, and we should be able to, according to the essentialists, if we're going to say that that's John, for example, we should be able to find them, point to that person. If we can't find that thing and point to it and identify it, well, then they wouldn't exist at all. For them, for something to be merely designatedly existent is not sufficient. That's not able to function or do the kind of work. So, however, the Prasangikas, Madhyamakas, assert that although one searches in this way, one does not find it. Therefore, they say that the appearance of a phenomena existing from its own side is a mistaken appearance. So here again, for the Prasangikas, they would say that this merely designated existence suffices. There's not something that we can point to and find that is that self, but yet we can say, like, when our aggregates or our form is sick, we say, I'm sick. If it were the case that there were some kind of a self that, say, existed inside of the aggregates but weren't them, then we couldn't say things like, I'm sick, when our form wasn't feeling well, and so forth.
Oh, yeah. Don't do matter. 어떤 데 다음에 봐서 똥번이 있어야 돼, 송구하라. 다음에 보면 똥번이 있어야 돼. 이 강사 강가를 쉐고야 시요 말이다. 모두 하다 미 고반 좀 게르지나. 예송 마집시 교와 침모대 하다 미 교와 상부시 톱부여나. 똥번이다 다음에다 근데 쉐고야 요 말에. 지단 그 강사 산지 좀 된데 검거실이야. 다 요래 송구하래. 가실 다요 말을 또 라와 두베 다요 말에서는 그 쉐도요 직도요 다가게 메도 삼사테 켄도 메베 칼네베 용고요 디디자 그 다요레세 나로라 남게 집에 다요레스 지루바가서 나시서도 예배선도 숨거래 가실이야 개머송고 제슈거래 요레스나 마디 메레스나 마디나 지대기요 말에 매스는 제달론도 그게 믿으시 예스는 다 요르삼 딱바치부 라옹아 슈치 요삼제가 간지야 슈치로 브레니가 요라 어디디 tiltara 망보 요래 가라지 고tum네 직가야로 지수수치 권에 되기도 마도 디르버도 망보 요라 딱바치부세 고베날 요가 딱바치부 그런 짱자 수지 로봇이고 말에 참매시그라 차치 찌요 말고 아주 소불에 참만부도가 차치 강보를 차시 만부치에도가 이제 딱보나 지부 참여시라 차치 치기요 말 그런 장점마다 그 로봇이에 그 말을 딱봐 지부라고 하시 근데 다요레스 어 근데지요 말에 치료해서 나시 딱봐 지부 근데 나올 거면 주는 것이 요 말에 쓰는 거라 야 풍부 수다 소보다 샘데도 파션 벨로가 다지요 풍부레 대신에 다서라 베들레 베카가 다 몸부세분나시 소보데 파샤 샘 파샤 초 파샤네 야 다시 콘주데 베카가 연게 근데요 말에 손에 풍부레 대신에 다요 말다스 근데 손에 요라 야 풍부 손알라 마데바 다세데 왜 손에 요 말에 스나 뱅게 와래 풍부가지고 당외실에 야는 소보되지 야는 샘데 초하루지 지삼을 다는가 삼고마도 계속 삼을마다는 시갈nga 삼을당시 시지라고 말아 라니 송아 최신 송아라 때문에 봐 송에 근데 요 말에 송아다 타라 망보치기 와라 어디세 Oh, yeah, what did you love now? The mother.
So here, what we are talking about is in reference to selflessness and emptiness. And again, the kind of teachings that the Buddha gave, in order to gain a good rebirth as a human or a god, one doesn't need to come to an understanding of selflessness or emptiness. And the Buddha taught in ways that really meet the various dispositions of disciples. And so some, if you were to teach them selflessness from the beginning, they would be afraid. That would induce terror, and they wouldn't properly understand that. So there are times when the Buddha talked about there being a self that sounds very similar to the kind of self posited by non-Buddhists. And there are times when the Buddha, say, if someone asked if there was a self, he remained silent, not answering that question, because there would be problematic consequences in either way. If the Buddha were to affirm that or were to say, oh, there is no self, there's the danger of that person falling into a kind of nihilistic extreme. And if you say that, oh, yes, there is a self, there's kind of a danger of them latching onto that and feeling more pride and sort of being obsessed with that self. And so here, when it comes to the Buddha's teachings, there are many levels of subtlety. If we think that there is some kind of a self that is like right in the center of us somehow, something that is permanent and that is partless and that is autonomous, as if it didn't depend upon anything else. It didn't have any sort of parts that we could point out. This is the kind of self that is negated in some of the teachings of the Buddha, where he's talking about how could there possibly be something that is completely partless and sort of autonomous and a singular kind of a thing. And so there are times when the Buddha speaks of there being such a self, but also refutes that there is such a self. And there are times when the Buddha's teachings are talking about refuting a self that is kind of something that is totally separate apart from the aggregates, that is seen as sort of independent of them. So there are various levels of subtlety to the Buddha's teachings in terms of refuting a self and dealing with our ideas of self. So this is something that we should be aware of.
Oh, yeah, do what you say. Oh, that she learned. That I am Zashi Lesse. Never less.
Yeah.
Uma tenjo many be chuna na chibe na o tidisa. Nyugutabu jawa rangwene yona se. Nyugutabu ra jawa de rangwene ya chu jawa chi yoga yona se. Nyuguya jiyo di shinge kan tendo ro jiyo di ya ngombo ya tayong gudwa. De rangwene kurang harad pata di kora tene ya tayong besora chi tongudwa. Kora ya tene tayong. Tengune chene ko sa chu me long jongwa. Nyele to su che te su kenji ko rawa me ya ke chu go ra ma to kora tene tayong ge chede ke yo ma ro. Rangwene ke che yo ma re. Tenji de ba jo shen da ge wa ge chu da ke so so ko lu bur tu ya tayong go ra. De kora ngene chu yo ya ji ke yo ma ro. Yukuda bo kya rangwene yo nas. Da ka chi ge mambo tu da mambo ko rangwene yo ra se tene kora ya tayong go rangwene ya. Rāngi ngōi yā tāng yōngu yā rā sī gā rā. Ngā rā zō tīn rābu rābu rī tōg dō, wā chē tā, sā shī lē sē. Ngō bō rāngu nē yō na, dīgi mā rē sī rāngu nē kio yō na, nē kāpān dō sī kāndē sī kī dō sī tsē chē nē, o dīndē sī kī yōngu dō wā sē rī chī. Tsē nē nye yō gō rē sī ngō rā, sā shī lē. Tā lē mā yī, shē lē mē, nī lē mā yī, kio mī mē, ngō bō kāndā kāndā, kio wā nā mē yō mē. O tā dī lū tūk dā mā tsū, shē dā mē, mā mbō yō rā. 다지에 치료바 세대 주단 제부 당이 집어치 치소 세르시오레 다도 뭐 주단 제부 당이 집어치세니 하게요 그래서 남 엄마바다 남벌 루천의 주단 제부 당이 집어요 말에 백화가요 그래 주단 제부니데 주디페 셀로가시 제부들 로가요 그래 그냥 메다 도하다 버와 가가도 사변당 요구도 백화가 제부도 주단 제부 당이 집어요 말에 다들버시 다지 켈랭게데 치르바 당신바세 되려 달레마이 라문의 여자 고체네 컨디션도 제주된 거로 다다 텐데스 기기 요사레서 말이 라문의 주베 주시에 말이 코랑코랑 셰체 게운 거라서라 Tinde trubda mao desi mada yongora, rangwine truba kaya langpa tiga tesi yongore. Segi yora, shira tse ne kawando tagi yora. Taji yomares. Shenle kiwa sido rangwine truba ju shenle drebu shen kiwa tasi yora. Rangwine truba ju shenle drebu shen kiwa. Pena nganzo, rangwine truba ju shenle ten drebu shen kiwa. Ju kora rangwado truba chikshe, drebu de rangwado truba chikshe, tende ya kyeche. Rangwine truba ju shenle ten drebu shen kiwa sigare. Ju shenle ten drebu shen kiwa tsamle sige yomare. Andele yang sungju menda mabu yung doa ke bas. Ju shenle ten drebu shen kiwa tsamle sige yomare. Di shenle mayin se. Rangwine truba ju shenle ten drebu shen kiwa de yomare ese. Dale mayin shenle mayin se. Nile mayin jume me tashen nigale kiwa kele gete de wara. Tiye mare se. Ju meba le tene kes. Changbin ba senge chiwara. Nima jaga tukta mawala. Ti tangbu de zambulin de yake de juge yo mare se gara. Ko samle tangyo ora kade syongyu na samgyo ora. Namga tangba chi kelia ane sa todo riri chi chora. Ko kade chora se. Namga tangba re. Ko ju yo mare kora rangshi chora. Ti tal ju chegan re ke yo mare. Ko rangshi chora ju mebal ten chora samgyo ora. Ke yo mare se ko rangshi chora. Ju yo ni a ti tal se kawa de. Tambu jungsa de chiko ora ko samgyo ora. Jumene kyores, te koran samu mambutang yore. Joashima yo, mangama yo, mariti, tagas, mizu, mi gote butu, teji she, shosha, mata, tende yo marisigar. Kanga tumbudes, tawasides. Sendi yamuji soye tendal, peshe yore. Kasangazus, the hippies, as you do, the power in the hippies, you can just see my repet. Now, content, now it was it as well. Ochinde so de shigore. Mesike dan kelute be. Chima san samlumada, chima samlumada ngama samlumada. Kan kipi ji kare tena de kan ka de chijure mado shenda ke samutang marisiore. Kurandi o tadi kejma bushe tadigre. Tale me shalem yilma jumi me. Jumi baleten ikwa seti otirita. Jumi baleten chigre sigore. Te mambuchi tengsa yudo. Juya chegan de tambuchi shawar te tal ju che yo mare sigdo. Tan zambulin dinde bachi ne ro. Tambudo nambu tambuchi kichara. Tati ke tambu khade chore sene. Nambu chene ko titen yo de. Nambu tongbe na tu tam yo. Ko zo le go nge churu ru se chi che tende che samgi yo ma do. Ti tal ka ge me to che yo ya ko yo mare. Kashi yang tambu juchi yore, tiya kendu de ne sangma chungwa desi, tili shekdwa. Ta tili ju yore besi na, tili ju yore ma desi retari. Kasa chi chedi bipangi na chi sedi ju yore ma desi sikdo kati, desi etwa. Nangba chini ju meni yung yore ma desi, ju meni chi yung ine ni kadu ine yung chowra, da menda kanga yung chowra. Tambu nga se tewu meyo chi ju de mengu bache, ni ku kali so ni ju tang yung si yora. Dati ndi bache. Jumi minisce, tale me shime, nil me jume. Wobu kanda kana ya kyawa namya yo mayes. Wobu kande china ya. Wobu kanda kana ya kyawa namya yo mayes. Wobu kande china kyawa de rangwani druba yo mare. Rangwa do kora tsu tanya chi yo mare. Kujin mangbuji soso na ko maten rande ko chema shira. Kujin gu wanga ko chwe chera. Ale shenda pa shangara to tawase. Darjo de shin to hagba jagdo ko te rakpa shena. 그 신의 요구도 다르셔도 요구도 그런 요구에서도 서로도 안 가죠. 그게 말로 라고전 그 마요라 주진시도 요도 요마도 그 요하시 진짜 말로 그런 거네. 그런 거네 요하게 말로 요요요라. 그런 거네 요하래 그래서는 땡진데 버리죠 요하래. 그 양보래. 아니 룽자요래. 뒤에서도 그 요소라. 그 짜르 두부치냐 그 요 말로. 띠바세.
So here, then continuing in the text, it says, if production of something such as a sprout were to exist from its own side, production from one of the four alternatives would be found, but it is not. So accordingly, Nagarjuna says in the first verse of Fundamental Verses on the Middle Way, in no sense is anything ever produced, whether from itself, from other, from both, or without a cause. So here, like, for example, when a sprout pops up, there's this green thing that's coming out of the ground, and it seems to us like, oh, that exists in itself, in its own right. There, that sprout came up due to its own power. But really, when we examine, we can see that this is something that only comes about due to an aggregation of causes and conditions. There has to be a sort of substantial cause and all of the coordinating conditions for a sprout to come about. It doesn't just do so in and of itself or by itself. Now, when we look at the four sort of alternatives of production, many philosophical schools land on one of these types of production. Like, for example, the first of these, that things being produced from itself. So due to their sort of philosophical thinking, they come to an understanding that things arise in and of themselves. It seems like they are produced from themselves. They seem to be sort of arising from their own power, and thereby schools like the Samkhyas, for example, assert that there is a sort of principal element that acts as the cause of all various effects, and this is predicated on cause and effect being of the same nature. Now, this is not something that we can accept, that the cause and effect here are asserted to have different natures. They aren't of the same entity or of the same nature. And so it's, although phenomena appear to be sort of set up by themselves, objectively existent in that way, when we really examine the way that they are produced, we can eliminate their being produced from themselves. Now, it is, there are those that would assert that production from another. Now here, when we refer to this second alternative of production from another, it isn't just a mere other, but it's in the sense of something that is inherently existent, a cause that is inherently existent, giving rise to a result that is inherently other. And so this, something that is existent from its own side, a cause existent from its own side, can't give rise to a result that exists from its own side. It's not just merely another production from a mere other that is being refuted there. And then we have the refutation of production from both itself and another, and without a cause. So here, there are philosophical schools think through these various things in order to land on a particular point. Like, for example, the Charvakas, who would say that there is no cause, that things arise causelessly. For them, like, for example, the way that we have sort of empty space and then the world comes about, they would say you can't actually point to a cause of that. It's just kind of random. There isn't any sort of original cause, and we can't point to a kind of causality. And this leads them then to sort of an attitude of like, well, there's no past and future lives, so let's just enjoy ourselves. Let's just do what we want. It's sort of like a hippie mentality, one could say, of like, well, nothing really matters. I'm just going to enjoy myself. I don't need to think about the future. I don't need to worry about that. And I'll just enjoy, do whatever makes me happy. So here, when it comes to looking at causality and trying to find, like, for example, posit an original cause of the world, this is something that is quite difficult to do. Even when we look at like scientists and their sort of theories, well, backing up. So if we have like an empty kind of a space, Buddhists would assert that there has to be the sort of potential materiality already there that, say, leads to the Big Bang. And when you try to trace back, well, like for scientists, they might say the original cause of this universe was the Big Bang. Well, what came before that? What led to that? So here, trying to point to an original cause can be problematic. But when we're talking about production from the four extremes, these are eliminated in that it's only due to a various aggregation of causes and conditions. Whatever it is can only come about sort of due to a various coming together of these causes and conditions. Like, for example, when we see the branch of a tree waving in the wind, we might think like it almost looks like that branch is just waving by itself. It's doing that on its own. But really, it's only because of these various causes and conditions, like the weight of the tree being light enough to be carried by the wind. If it were something metal, it wouldn't be doing that, and so forth. And so the way that things appears to us is as though they were sort of caused by themselves, doing it by themselves. But in actuality, when we investigate and analyze, we can see that that's not really the case.
뭐야? 어머 죽발래 장서도. 신다 라엘라레 샌드 미스. 신다 다보세로. 니마일레 신다 수주다까지 콜로레 코시야마도. 다트사는 남주다. 모자다 컴퓨터다 망부도와 잘라베 투자 망부샤네. 어때 주장도서 자네야 어디 치워라. 신다 라엘라레 샌드메. 신다 수도코 때내 딱 봤자면 망부지 초네네 티 강가가 담아다 소소래거래 제대로 돕네네. 신다 두고도 신다 잘라 오르게도 민두고도 세로. 로 남두도 남두다 잘라 오르게도 민두고도 스피르소세 다고로와. 네, 그 편게 남두라고 하지 요 말이와. 잘라 동도 마무요라 진짜시 당경이 미요라. 뒤뒤고 신대 랑엘라레세 랑윈에 요 말이 랑윈에 요나. ene ti yala tondra mambu yora shingda de kolo da nalo tesa da chi mambu yora o tezo chi dire si chi ngoje shingda rayala le shende rangi yala kolo la so ba tezo le rawe shenje yo mare so shende yo mare se yala tezo kaya ma yenge chi loga chi gu marwa namdu de namdu na chala ka je yo chi namdu te rangi ne yo na ka ba yora se yora Rangwine yona, and Yala to the Kayama is pet logachi or Western Teo Marva. Cinderella sending me. Shemi Maise, Shemaimba the eyes, to the Rangwine to be shinda in a Namdu in a Tinde more to Marva. Then they are mentions Demba my Karsura. Demba Siddhata Telia, Teda Sobotelia, Dance Yoga Madeso, Yana Dance Yona, Yana Mochibush and Dance Yorta, Pekagas and Dance Yodese, Legilia, Motatan Demba, Sarah, Ra, Legilia, Mr. Shilia, Kamba Yore, Kambatan Demba, Motatan Demba, Sarah, Tended Dance Yodita, Yana, Legilia. Kechi Lulan Gotan Dembere said, Mo Chikbakura Chasher of Chichen Dembere, Tindrin Desuchen Yomaresora. Semi Mayet and De Ambeshi. The Yala Lame Yala Tanderme. Yashin de Yala Dozo, Tensa de Che, Shinde Kora Rawan to Trubache Tilpa Tenche, Tindrese Yomaresora. Amene Kasura, Shinda de Tensa of Yala to the Pa, Rawa Sugitan Tendrio Maresora. Duba Chamis, Yala Toba de Shinda Maresora. If the Sobda de Shinda Maresora. Or the Tendesen on the Raumado, Rawan to Trubachiona, Tendesen Yokura. Tanga to Diva Sawashira Kwasu Tashi Sunguva. Pumi population tela pumi terde me tishishiba pundemes tanga sugudwa sanje inanda simje inanda kaga nelu tatul chibare sanje inanda ngarazu tade sera pumbu se soso rawa du tubachi yobe yena rawa pumbu reje ne tade betie maro pumi se pumbu le ten shemba pe kaga chene tachi ware tie yo maro tela pumi se the Rawa Chiche Telepungu de Teshen, Josegala Chala Shabana Shituste de Tiomara. Pumi Pumbule, Telepume. Terdeme Yana, Da de Tensa de Che Rawache, Telepumbu to Teshen to Tense, Josegala Pova Shabana Shiche Telestego Tiomarisera. Pumi Pumbules and Telepunted, Tishishiba Pundemesedo. Tishishiba. Pumbuliatene, Dembetsuge Maresere. Dembetsugiona, yana shingna nalia tayore, siyore, sero, tinashi, pe kakashin, o kakashin demba yogura. Yana kwe chashen rochilia, che yogura. O tindika yomase, pungi pumbu lesime teleponte, tishiba punde mense. Tishiba kanshi yense, ta zendro na, sanje de raguma rese gora. Ramado tubachi yone zeni nye yogura. O di tanga sodowa. Yani, uman juba kapsu, yibda, tsokwas ni, da ma rese, ta tunse, ta tun. Tande de tanga rwa. Zashi kapsu gumbuluru tanga so. Uman juba kapsu sigan ni tubachi. Shinde rangela le shende me sheme ma intende yama yala me yala tande me tichi bara. Duba tsam mes, yib mes. Tsokwa de shinde re se yo mare. Yib de sabda shidwa de yin se de re yo mare. Ta tuen se ra. Ya tichi lamna, maunta.
So then it continues saying, therefore, sprouts and so forth have no production that is ultimately established or established from its own side. If it did, it would have to be of one of those four types. So then similarly, Chandrakirti's entering the middle way states, a chariot is neither asserted to be other than its parts, nor to be non-other. It does not possess them. It does not depend on the parts, and the parts do not depend on it. Neither is it the mere collection of the parts, nor is it their shape. Searching for the self is like this. So here in Chandrakirti's entry to the middle way, he uses the example of a chariot. Now we could use any number of different kinds of machines of today. We can talk about like a car or a plane or a computer, whatever it is. If we have like something like a plane, there is this collection of parts on the basis of which we designate, oh, that's a plane, and that plane is carrying people. It's carrying those various things. It's flying over there. But when you try to find, well, what is that plane from among all of those thousands of parts, there's not something that we can point to and say, well, this is the plane. So here, it's not as though a chariot, for example, or a plane or whatever we want to examine is asserted to be other than its parts. We can't talk about that thing other than being designated on a particular collection of parts. So there can't be something that is other than that. We have to look at the various sort of parts, and it can't be not other nor non-other in the sense that it isn't just its parts. It isn't the exact thing that it is being designated on. Nor is there a relationship of kind of possession. In the sense of possession, we could have two different types of possession, like in the sense of like Devadatta owning a house or a car, where the possession is something that is sort of a different nature. Or we could speak of possession in the sense of like being a part of something, like, oh, Devadatta has a head and that is part of his body. The kind of relationship between the thing designated and its basis of designation is not like this. There is neither a sort of inherent kind of possession nor non-inherent sort of possession, but rather it's this again, relationship of designation. And nor is it the case that a chariot, say, depends on the parts. Like the parts are here and the chariot is something that's sort of like set on top of them, the way we could put a cup on a table or something like that. Nor is it the opposite way of the sort of the thing that is designated, the chariot being the support or the place of dependence for those parts sort of existing on top of it. Neither of those works for something that, again, appears to us to have this kind of autonomous existence. And this is the case whether it is a chariot or any other thing. Now here, the last, the sixth and seventh types of analysis refer to it not being the mere collection of the parts, nor is it their shape, the sort of arrangement of those parts. Now, Nagarjuna has stated that in reference to the Tathagata, but in this verse, we can think about it as a Buddha or a sentient being, whatever it may be, that the Tathagata is not not their aggregates, nor other than their aggregates. They don't possess the aggregates, nor do they depend on the aggregates, nor does the aggregates depend upon them. Well, what other than that, though, could be the Tathagata? So here, this is like this kind of examination that was here in the verse by Chandrakirti. But if we take there are these five, again, sort of five different modes of analysis of the thing designated being its basis of designation, being other than its basis of designation, possessing that, being dependent on it, or that being dependent upon it. So none of those kinds of relationships can explain the sort of relationship between, like, for example, a Tathagata and the aggregate. And now here, whether we take the Tathagata or an ordinary being, a chariot, whatever it may be, those five different modes of analysis are what Nagarjuna presents, and Chandrakirti adds on to that it is not just the mere collection of those parts, nor is it their shape.
Oh yeah. She sing the ta dundu tsebe many batar ta jan ta dundu tsebe many ba yimbe. Sing the dar ta jan ta damba mebar song shin yese. Ta dundu the lapsa tinane kansala su chabena. Pumbugan soba de drawing tribe tama resora. And a pumbu yipte, sobu yipte tamaris and ngare dura. Oh, Dalia tatin, Shingdale tatin. Shingde tatin did go a sebadua. Shinde Rangel Shendu, Shemima, Tendam, Yala, Yala, the Dubats and Yibmi Sudua. The Kansal Suchan, Ni Tabakacha, Pumunga Soba there, Dubats and the Mayache. And so we yip the Tamares in the Chatura. Oh, Tishan to Ranger Travel Legend, Tachi, what is it, my long penny? Ranger Travel Legend, Wobulu to the Omar Ranger Travel Legend. Give us some chuma, give us your consular. That thousand Jago, Doctor Dabatrubayena, and it in the part, Tausu Chesu Corner, Kagure, Sede, Jenny near you with Esongora. That's so mulia, Tauchere. Kibudi, don't meet up with the don't number around when the Trubachivene, give you so dabutinane, dying but in you, Marese. Give us some means the Sashi, so we rebel as over Sashi Tragu Chadles and Gora. Same, Chumans the Chada, Chusilas over the Zomare, so which I say. Me is a Tregicha, so what Sabucha days a Tregicha Dember. Long means a Upas or Dieta Puga, Ut in the Tiger or this or Lung to Somaris, Lung Jogura. Long me, Namga Mester, Puga Namgasi, Tong Santin de Gora, Naguna Tongbacha Uyatin with the partner with Cobenalo Tongba Mana and the Marua, Paso, teaches a color to Tesukama. The so called Mares Tamares or Lumi, Meme, Lumi, Namgashi, Namgas the Puga Namga Tong Sandis Gora, Utang at the Tong Sand. Namshi, number Sheba de Tamas, Tatina Soa Mare, Dushi Mare, Tespacha Jurva, Kondu Mare, Nagia Mare, Chato Mare, Lake, whatever the Mare, the Shanda Pugu Shandal Chana, Tanda de Sobuli Chana Shedo. Namshi Maya Queen Mena, Tesha the Pumbulama Queen, Tare or Maris. Teleshena Kibuka, Pumbungale Shendo, Tada Wombo Seven, Shita Palana, Shia Loga, Loso Tachi or Vetendego Marwasugora. She Kibu Rangi Dashi, Susotas. Dashis the Chershi, she Charas Gora, Azumiri Tosana, or Drashiri, Tendure, Sherman, Chis, Lavi, and Miss Tongura, Tabutoyasiora, Sobori Tony, or Tichiri, Dichiri, Tare, Palare, Motari, Mina, Tiris, Lapura, Tambutoyatele, Dashisigora, Kodaki, who is Tosana, Kambi Dashir, or Pika Kambashi Doasa, Shingri to Yagado, or Pika Shinji Doasamsa. Dashise, Namga Tongbalia, or Metal Kambari in the Taya or Marwa. Tambuchi Sem Chade Shishkora, or Dilla Dashisigora. Dashi Pumbunga Sura, Council in the Dashi Pumbunga Yora. Tinashi, Kambari, Dashi Mabudo, Toda, Zigbada, Sabada, Jada, Jisega, Kajakaji or Mambuyora. she Kibu Rangi Tashi Susota Namshi La Sobata, Tedale Shen Soan the Shindishila Soba. Shenda Kane Jamini, Kibu turned them by Meba so Kibu turned them by Yomare, Rangune Yomare, Rangshingi Yomare, Tombani said, or the turned number, Truna, Rangune Yona. That's any year you go to it, Manina, Rangune me do some sound de Comgoda. Sure, what about the children?
So here, just as one cannot find a chariot by searching in these 7 ways, one cannot find the self by searching in these 7 ways. So like those 7 that were given there, the self is not asserted to be other than the aggregates, nor is it none other than the aggregates. It doesn't possess them or depend on them, nor do the aggregates depend on the self. And then when we apply here those last 2, nor is the self the mere sort of collection of those aggregates, nor is it the arrangement or the shape of the aggregates. And so therefore, Chandrakirti indicates that, like the chariot, the self does not ultimately exist. If it were ultimately existent, it would have to be something that could bear scrutiny, could bear analysis, that you could actually find something and be able to point to as being that thing. And so similarly here then, Nagarjuna states in the Precious Garland that the person is not earth, not water, not fire, not wind, not space, not consciousness, and not all of them. Yet what person is there apart from these? So again, when we're trying to search for the person within the basis of designation, we can look at like, is the person the sort of solidity of the body, those hard parts like our bones and so forth? No. And is the person the kind of watery parts like the blood and marrow and so forth? Or is the person the kind of inner heat that they have? Or is the person the sort of wind, their breath, those various, the sort of motility or movement within the body? Or is the person the kind of empty space? We have to have hollow space to be able to take in breath and so forth. And is a person the consciousness? None of these can we point to and say that is the person. Yet there's no person apart from that. So we can't look at any of the aggregates, like the aggregate of consciousness, for example, and say that is the person. The person isn't that, say, moment of anger or the thought that they've had, or they're not their karmic formations. It's not as though the person is the virtue that they did. But what could the person be apart from that collection of aggregates? There's nothing that we can point to and say there is the person. So it's not like the person, like the aggregates are here and the person is over there, like blue and yellow, or like an ox and a cow, but rather it's only on the basis of designation that we designate a person. So as Nagarjuna states, since one cannot find the person within its basis of imputation, form, consciousness, and so forth, somewhere other than that, the person does not ultimately exist. And so here, when we have this process of designation, initially there is something that appears to us that we then designate on the basis of. So there has to be something that appears to us first, and then we say, oh, that is like, we see walls and windows and so forth, and we think, oh, that's a house. But if we were to then search within all of the various components, within the wood and the nails and the glass and all of that, we can't find something that says that is the house. But there's nothing, there's no way to designate that other than having the appearance of that basis of designation. Now, if there were something that existed in the way that it appears, that would have to be ultimately existent from its own side, objectively existent in its own right.
Yeah. Chökanshi yöna rangwine yö go basira. Rangwine mena me go bade. Ane de unga mawala sabate zu lu de se wada. Me go bade unga bo yö bar mawa nam de lu yin je se. Unga bo yö ba mawa se unga bo tong tamba yö rangwine yö tembar yö se de. Marazu rangwine yö ba tona si tembar re se yö de se. O te zu lu de se ngora. Uma be lu ma re sta Italia keba kachi ki shi ju me dan do sa ro. Yö na rangwine yö go de uma be lu la. Rangwine me na me re se she ro de uma be lu ma re. 띵어부 띵루마도 저거 로레세 우마베 로레야 요나 랑군에 요고 말에 랑군에 매나 매고 말에세 디카바레스 계속요라 우마 땡교에 루라 테다르칼레스 우마 땡교 로레 테레 말에세 요나 랑군에 요고 말에 랑군에 매나 매고 말에 랑군에 매 때네 딱 봤삼도 요세 저 dakshi chashe kora mayingi chashe rupchilite ene soso löpa tasha kora lo lai wan chenpu yore löpa tanya sede jikdenge tanya sede lo dang chanyi bide pa jik tasha ra ming tasha ra kondru rabi sena pajo mide soso duja shibuji soso löpa taw yora ko rangwine kondru yidu mewa jini mi kange yidu mewa tongu ra te tongu ma ra soso yo ko chi deji shedang mandi ne tadam ji mandi ne ko duja shibuji du samura yujibone Matan ko rangwine kyangya maro soso löpa taw yora ti mena mi kange ko tundo be duja shibuji du samgumedo yiduwa re na ya wo shibuji du sam mi chi to de kange yiduwa tongu maro mi chi yiduwa to na ti tu number tamje tu yiduwa tongu medo so samlu tande lo ta na yiduwa tongu ri amata ko so ke medo mada be ko so to na ko chi na mi ba tongu ri ma to yiduwa da ma o tende ke tongu ma to sa so so lo li pa ta ba tanye yo wang ki sha ba se dang lai ko da du sha o yo ko ban de ngo ba ma lo re ma to ten yo lo ma re se ta ke be shi ji me da yo go ra rang ge pung bu thong la ten es ke sa ten yo lo ka la yin se pe na ten yo lo la le ji ta bu rang ge pung bu thong la ten es de le ji shi ta do fa ta ro ta ba sam je ani de do nyaw bu le ji yu zu zo wa re se o le ji na de do le ji do do te sha se ta le ji si ming de wa ne ma cha ga le ming ta su de do wa ha la so tam ne chung ba to me de le ji se ra che ge chi ba de ta ne ya bu jo de te che ne chu jin se ra de ming da su do wa ti de le ji ba se le ji yu zu zo wa ye be le ji to be ta wa sam ji cha wa chi ne su yo ba de jo la se te samge leje sha gore ne te leje sobuda semda kondo te sha karchene o leje kondo se sha leje kibudu leje te tebumedu leje dugudu leje desha labora jima se leje ma se sha leje sobu tebumedu leje nagudu se ro kaga sha gora mado leje dodo chi yune te pumbu nadi sobu nadi leje nagu yo marwa san ko tene tak ma sam de tezu kangal te jin de ne leje se sha gu yo da tene tak ma sam se ten jin de ba jo wa se mang bo je chok ba tak shi chi te ne te ge le pa chi ta te zam le ko sha te zu cha she du le ga chi de leje cha wa chi ba sha cha wa chi tu be tung ge nyong ge te wa nyong ge kang ga sha ko de si go ra rang ne me ba ne tung ge nyong ge me ba de nying ji ke go ma de se su de真正加入了的，这话都是修的重要的。同一年我那些买呢，你全部是记得大概是出囊是都加入了，一直做不来，这些都被大三节小话今天是有文章了，我嘛那么些呢，这三节有就做过蛮严巴的是，今天大把三节来信巴的大，来信可能一旦一路去有的我那要的三节的，这个来信是大概。leje de kai tseven de yin shi rangu ne leje ni ju yo ba shi ko de so ra ke de dar je na leje ma ne na leje rangu ne me ba yi be se te da na leje te ne me go ba ye so ngo bu tin ru ma zo te ra ngo bu rangu ne chi ra ye me na ne me re te ne me ba re je bo ra da nam ge me do te chi ba de so ra uma te jo ta na te dar ma ngo ma nam ne 딱제게 타니 마을에 만들어 되고 뭐또 딱보다 첩에 타카로 마을에 만들어서 뭐 딱바스도 야는 랑원에 여시그라 저담보 여레스도 딱달로 놓으래 야는 랑원에 매 요마를 민도 시슬람네 체달로 놓으래 예버데 매버전에 체바로 체달에 랑원에 매버데 여바를 따와들 딱딱시그라 그죠 우마바다나 드다마 응어보마 남네 따제게다 뭐 yana tagda lo yana cheda lo ma do kunzu namsha karichena mandri bodese ora yana yob de mebe so shawara yana mebe ji yob so shawara one chene ngo ne ju koran karina tina shi sha to skura uma bade ko tanyi da te unjo shenke de se ora karu ma le mande bar song de se kansa rangune yob ta na kansa rangune yob ta na 딱다르 로 태주와신에 랑원에 여봤다나 딱베 탈을 흉도로 가서 딱뭐 랑원에 여봤다나 딱베 탈을 흉도로 산도로 거 랑원에 매베 자와 진에기 가사자 요 말에서 따위네 체다 흉도래 여버데 매베 소샤 탈 흉도라 실송소소 어디버도 제도 상야.
So, here in the system of the essentialists, if a phenomena exists, it must exist from its own side. For if this phenomena did not exist from its own side, it would not exist at all. So, here for the essentialist schools, they say that for something to exist, it needs to have that kind of objective or inherent existence from its own side. That is necessary in order to be able to posit its existence. Whereas for the Prasangika Madhyamikas, this is not true in their system. So, for example, in the Prasangika Madhyamika system, by merely imputing with terms and concepts, this is Devadatta, independence upon seeing Devadatta's aggregates. The mode of existence of Devadatta, the person who experiences happiness and suffering, is encompassed. So, here, when it comes to the way that we have something that is the basis of designation, and we use our various worldly conventions to designate on things. And so when we designate, for example, something appears to us and we designate that as being unpleasant, and we use that kind of designation in order to get angry. If it were the case that said person were to really objectively exist as unpleasant, as an enemy, as something that were bad, then it would have to be the case that every person, everything that encounters them would have to see them in that same way. And we know that that is not the case. Rather, it is merely the case that we are positing by force of our conceptual designations. So when we talk about like this is Devadatta, we are merely imputing with terms, with words, and with our thoughts or concepts. This is Devadatta, independence upon seeing, in this case, Devadatta's aggregate. So, and here we can, Devadatta is just a name, an old Indian name like Dharmadatta as well is one that, and datta has the sense of giving. So one who makes offerings to the gods or one who makes offerings to the Dharma, this is where that name is coming from. And we just go back to the Sanskrit. So anyway, Devadatta, when we see like the body of Devadatta, we can think, oh, there is Devadatta. And when we're not really thinking about that or investigating any further, we can speak of, oh, look, he's going over there. Oh, Devadatta is sitting down. Oh, Devadatta is sick. Oh, Devadatta is hurt, and so forth. Oh, he's angry. And when we are speaking in this way, it is something that is merely designating. There's a collection of parts, and we are designating on that collection, oh, this is Devadatta, and oh, this is he's he's injured or he's sick or whatever it may be, and this is this comprises his existence. So as it says, by merely imputing with the terms and concepts, this is Devadatta, independence upon seeing Devadatta's aggregates. The mode of existence of Devadatta, this person who experiences happiness and suffering, is encompassed. He is merely designated, and that kind of merely designated thing is it suffices for being existent. Now, so in this case, for example, when it comes to if something were existent from its own side, again, objectively existent, we might ask, like, well, why would we even have compassion for that? If something is existent from its own side and there's no possibility of any sort of change or a development of that, there would be no reason to even feel compassion for that. So, but in the Madhyamaka system, they posit that Devadatta has the ability to perform functions by being merely imputed by conception. And so from the perspective of essentialists, being merely imputed by conception does not encompass the mode of existence. They assert that by searching for that which is Devadatta, when you make the imputation, this is Devadatta, you would need to be able to find something. Like, you need to find Devadatta to exist from his own side so that you can identify this is him. And if on investigation you do not find Devadatta, then Devadatta would not exist from his own side, and therefore he would have to be completely and utterly non-existent. And so here, these essentialists are mistaken with regard to the things that exist and things that don't exist. That which actually exists, these mere designations, they assert as utterly non-existent, and this kind of inherent existence or existence from its own side, something that is being negated by Prasangika Madhyamakas, is something that they're upholding. So it's sort of like they're reversed, or they're in the wrong way with regard to what it is that exists and what does not exist. So from the perspective of a Prasangika Madhyamaka, essentialists who make such an assertion do not avoid asserting one of the two extremes, permanence or annihilation. When they assert that persons and so forth exist from their own side, they fall into that extreme of permanence. So they're holding things that they say that for things to exist, they have to exist from their own side. They have to have that objective existence, and thereby they're falling into this extreme of permanence. And when they assert that persons capable of performing functions do not exist because they do not exist from their own side, they fall into the extreme of annihilation. So they're unable to posit correctly functioning things existing if they are not existent from their own side.
Oh yeah. The long the chamber was the Tarian, the Taiba, Logan, Dawata, she kept in Jabales. Move over my Tarnase. Chisito move the Yavani, but Chisito, ranking all Yavanilas. Yes, and the Rangune Yoko Resigora Conde. And the Rangune Mena Mavre Sigora. Can't get a ranking all that Travatese. Tell them over the number Tamje to Mavese, Rangune Mena, ranking all to a Mena, number Tamje Mavere. Rabon Ratandra, Pumbu Ratandra, Pumbul Rajigoma, or Titandra. Pumbu Ratandra, Tanya Soma, and Madebesir. Rangune Yosigre, Rangumen Mena, Mavere Siguratico, Keshe Kaviana, Tatal Londuriana, Cheddar Londurisora. Never see you ever Lamdura, Tin Tatara. You are the Mava Resalam, Cheddar Londura. They remember the Batamje, Dikonja, they remember the Batamje, Wabamawage, the Batamje de, and then we never that to Badika or Rese, to Mareshe, some Bataros, what is Rosana?
So here, then the Master Chandrakirti states in his commentary to the 400 stanzas, so providing a kind of a source for this, essentialists say that whenever things exist, they have an essence. So as they see it, without essence, these things would be completely non-existent, like the horn of a donkey. So for them, if there is no kind of objective existence, inherent existence, existence from their own side, then things would fall into being utterly non-existent, like things like a rabbit's horn or a sky flower, things that are utterly non-existent. Therefore, these essentialists cannot avoid being proponents of both the extremes of permanence and annihilation. So at the same time, where they are asserting that for things to exist, they must exist objectively, that also means that they are unable to understand how things could exist as mere designations, and therefore fall into that extreme of annihilation as well. And so consequently, it is difficult to reconcile all of their explicit assertions.
Oh yeah, that should not be used to let's say about it. That don't do the tal shares are young to share the super shiranya. You still let's say about it. Coach you but then it about something your race or then you never to your race. Rangune your mares. Rangune men actually your race. Chawach and get you a shark race. What in this one you are share your long time to share your Oh, Tautu Chena, Meba Ranshiki Mebatore. Rangune Yona, di Kawares, Yandi, Pumbares, Dilhechin Res, Tagbatunde, Rangune Yona, Takagres, Chena, Raesh Yogora, Rang Tautu Chena, Meva Ranshigi, Chena, and a Tautu Chen. Ragu Mariti, Mevati, Rangshigi, Mevetor, Matu Meveta Marista, Talia Shesa, and the man Josoloshan. Sashida, Jubala Sobe Kapsuse, Kede, Mumawa, Namjib Devatar, Wombuta, number Shebata, Migi Ombuna, Busera, Migi number Shana, Tezukango Chajura, Kansala Sopa, Nam Rangi Ngui, Kenga Soji Mor Yenas, Rangi Ngui to be Kawadan Gabat and draw the wall of Sobakarina. The Tashi Kengo Dase, Tashi Kawango very best to grow Talemai Shalem Nilmai Tal Dosasa. Tatinji Ribala Sobe, Tekunanula Chebe Ribe, Kansada, Kawa Kain, she says, Sevana, Nebarton Din, she says Sevara. Nieku ba shi yin ya tedar menye pe che tedar rangi ngoy me ba da rangshin gi trube tongba yin bar song so wo ti chi lo shana peji ma lo shana peji de gire
So here
ya
then, and this is going to sort of reiterate some of what we have already heard, but we now turn to how phenomena exist and really giving the kind of scriptural citations for this as well. So here, when we negate like objective existence and existence from its own side, still being able to posit things as being functional, this is the point that we are getting to here. And so when you search for the imputed object, you do not find it. As in, according to the essentialists, if things exist, they would have to have that kind of objective inherent existence. And so if you don't find them, that would mean they're utterly non-existent. But according to Nagarjuna's fundamental verses on the middle way, and Chandrakirti's entering the middle way, essentialists assert that the sensory faculties, consciousness, person, and so forth, essentially exist, being produced and ceasing by their own essence. So here, like our sensory faculties, our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and so forth, all of those, as well as our consciousness, the person, all of these phenomena must essentially exist, as in being produced and ceasing objectively or in their own right. However, so when we look at things like a pillar or a pot or a person, we should be able to point to them and say, this is it. But if that were so, if this were so, you would be able to analyze production, the person, and so forth, with reasons that investigate reality, like the ones that have been presented above, the four alternatives produced from self, from other, both self and other, or neither, and the sevenfold analysis, as we went through, and so forth, and find them very clearly and be able to say with certainty, this is it. However, this is not what you discover after such analysis. So if it were the case that phenomena existed in their own right, and essentially as these essentialists exist, we should be able to find them, to be able to point to them when we engage in this kind of reasoned analysis.
oh yeah ta tamma de khong lu chang ge ora
Mhm.
tedar yimba yan da da be shi ge ben de na song shas ti chi tedar number che ba na se rangune yo ba de ka yin se che ba che na ta ra yo ma ro yu da wang bu da ta de yu gang ga yu su tra de ro re ja che xiong gu ra wang bu de la mi ge wang bu na yong bu ne wang bu che wang bu lu yong yi yong bu xiong gu ra wang bu de la tembe nam she de la mi ge number she ba su thong mi ge number she ba tra to be na ne nam ka she na number she ba ji so re ne number she ba che number she ba lu ge number she ba nam she tu yo na ji long che che de le tu yo ra su tra de ro re ja che sta yu de ya ro che be yu de le tu che ne wang bu de le mi ge wang bu na wang bu ne wang bu che wang bu lu ge wang bu yi ge wang bu che wang bu tu yo ra tele de nam she de le mi ge number she na number she ne number she che number she lu ge yi ge number she ba tu yo ra o te zo kangal pa cha ra o te che te da na rigbe number she ba na wang bu ta yu da number she ba nam la yu be ngo yu be yebe ngo mebe rangi ngo tuba me do se o te zo kangal ya rangi ngo tuba yo ma ngo tuba yo ne che ne ta ra go ro Ketin dinam rangi ngoyo tuba junani teche tebe number chebana, rigbe number tetuji rigbe number chebana, che sebu cheche diresha su chu tengyu chiko deswa. Sewara chidernebe ngoyo yoba nidu migban juwashine migban ya mayidi. Teche rangshingi tongo se rangune yobe tongbara rangune me desi. Che jawa tubu she sonso ya o teche lakshana. Angma she sar chibara.
So, however, that's not what you discover after such an analysis. You discover only the lack of essential existence and the emptiness of inherent existence. So searching in this way, trying to find such an inherent existence, you can't find the thing itself. So in this vein, Chandrakirti's commentary on the 400 stanzas states, when reason analyzes in this way, no essential nature is found existing in the sensory faculties, objects, or consciousnesses. So here we have our sense faculties, all the way from our visual faculties, our auditory, all the way up until the mental faculty, as well as the objects of those. We have forms and sounds and smells, tastes, touch, and mental objects. And then we have the consciousnesses. So there is the visual consciousness and all the way up until our mental consciousness. And so we apply this kind of analysis to all of those, looking at them, trying to find the thing existing by some kind of essential nature or having some sort of essential existence. They're not to be found. If they existed essentially, reasoned analysis would clarify, would be able to find and sort of point out that essential existence, but it does not. Therefore, they are established as empty of intrinsic nature. So if it were the case that this reasoned analysis could get at that thing, we could find that sort of objective existence, we should be able to point to it clearly. This is it. However, we find that such analysis leads to realizing they're empty of an intrinsic nature.
Oh yeah. Thank you, Tanasta, thank you, the Rangibas in Yura. Thank you, Logan Tower Travel, so what is the thank you, Atana Miso Rangun and Mares, Chiri Yubares, what they con do a Loma Butan Sheswa, Condo Sheba, Tekuna Chebe, Ribanam, Chunam Rangune, Yuba, Yubam Rangshiki, Yuba Selne, T. Yuna, and the Cavando Sitse, Yuba Choverche, Tadarche Manibana, Mobona Rangan Moyuba. Rigbe da gen gwa song ge ta rigbe ka se de rangwene yo na ka ba yo state cha ne ta min do a se de ne rangwene yo ba de rigbe pha ka re ma to yo ba de rigbe ka ma re se go ra ta de chir a de chi bar chir chir le je number me ba ro le chum de yo ku ra le je number me be de bu migla so be wong bo ro ten je de bar jo ge Kenga so Megoches. Tedane Yoba Hebe, Tanedo Yobe, Legend Debu Mila Soba Yober so Tanedo, Legend de la Soba, Legend Debu Pumbuta, Wombola Soba, or Tezukanga Yoba so there say. What is it, Losana?
So, here, then, for the Prasangikas, and we need to distinguish the Prasangika Madhyamakas from the Svatantrika Madhyamakas. So the Prasangikas falling after Chandrakirti and Buddhapalita and so forth. Although eyes and so forth do not exist from their own side, they do exist in general. So as explained above, you search with reasoning, analyzing reality for existence by intrinsic nature or from the side of phenomena. So when you do not find this when searching for it in that way, this refutes phenomena existing by their own essential nature. But this does not refute the production and so on that is the dependent arising of the eyes and so on that are the fruit of karma. So here again, when we are using this reasoning analysis in order to refute objective existence, that refutes that kind of objective inherent existence, but not mere existence, does not refute the kind of dependent arising of our eyes and and so forth that are the results of karma. And so here again, because from Chandrakirti's commentary on the 400 stanzas, because our analysis is intent on seeking intrinsic nature, we refute here things that exist essentially. We do not refute that eyes and such are products and are dependently arisen results of karma.
Oh yeah. Tatamati kung changyora, tundachibura. Tedari and Dawadrabe Shigaban Rebalese. Ko Jagi number Chevanese, Taksha Shed, Umatanjoga Chebachan, Kayo Kaba said, Sora. Ranshitsu Alurchiba in the Ranshi, Gitubayona, Tikares, Titseva, the Tochigoresa. Ko Jan and Dirangobo, Nam Rangi Motubangogi or Mato. Mila Soba Chesh, Tenji Debarjo, legend number Mibala Soba, Tezuka, Yomaresungura. Shesum Bataros, Ya Tichilam. Tama, Dira, Chetonga about Sum Shabatina, Loon, Pigilaurina, Sum Shabati, the Red Kung, the Red Dose, the Kung, the Sutangiora. Oh, yeah.
So these are the same kind of sources that are cited by Lama Tsongkhapa in his stages of the path, his great stages of the path. And so here, I accidentally read ahead, but to this quotation from Chandrakirti's commentary to the 400 verses says that because our analysis is intent on seeking intrinsic nature, we refute here things that exist essentially. We do not refute that eyes and such are products and are dependently arisen results of karma. So again, these are quotations and texts that Lama Tsongkhapa relies on in his stages of the path.
Oh yeah. Tashi Kengo Jirbe, Chirkewa Zamengo, Tati Chibara, Kebangashi Shizuya, Tashi Kengo Ripati Kewaka Yores, Kewati Yona, Dishina Sutu, Tati Mata Kewayomar, Tati Shidikas, the Kewakasa Res, Sungara, Tendimarese, that's Chitongaba Sujana. Tashi Kewakaya take Chirikewakogi Amarese, Rangine Trube Kewakagi on Mato Kewangogi on Mares Tishayona. Oh, Tashi Kengo Jirbe, Chirikewata Mengovas. Getting over Nam Ranshiki Kewam, Rangine Kewam, Turntambe Kewayona, and the Tale Kigridan Shele Kiri, Niliki, Cumiliki, Tashi Kengo, Taldosa. Yoko Baleteda Kanto and maybe Turntambe Kewa. Go by in yesterday, turned and bake your Rangwin to bake your did go yours. Turned them like you very well, Namji, Chiri Kujinji, do chebe. Get some young watch, maybe, don't but them, but do not stick your Koranka Baras in the Mandu. The Dana Ngobo Nam Debu Keve, Chawachini Tombango, Moshamji Pudar, USA. Kikadus and Chirikawa Kabayani, Nobukanga Mab Sadura, Nobukanga Mab Redutin, and Mosham Punashi, so what you say. Then it's Chebe Tarlo and the Chetares, Jibatan Dembara, Chebe Tarlo and Jiboyores. You had the data timber message, the data timber message, Rangun and Mab the Mabos, or today the timber mother, Yishi Mesawara. Nam Kewa Chidar Rangune, Yovara Naya, Tedar Nawata to Meba, Tedar Nawata to meditation to Debuki Chawa, Chinuji, Kumala Sobatada, Chawa Cheber Sosos, Kumala Sobatada Drawa Chawa Cheto with Ese, Ramu Rana should attend the town and map to the Marese. Now, Nashi Temperio Mar, the Ina Kutumakora Yora. No, Nashi Temperio Marmato. Tedara Shigaban Rebales. Get the number Cheva, D, Kewa number Tamjeto. Oh, yeah. Kewa number Tamjeto. Kakpale. Duje Kewa Meba Tempa Donane. Tese, Jumatabu Nito, Minjurge. Jumatabu Sudokochina, Juma Yobali, Anawata to Betembasil Sigora. So one Meba Yenani, Jumatabu Segio Marise. Mosam you put up Remo Rata would attend and do this, Sigara. Minjurge, Mosam you pull us over target shower and you are Shina. Tension Deborah, you are Meba Tower and you and Zibe. The data timber messages and Mosam you put she is Meba and said that Tunga Massa, ye Tunchik Massura. Jumala soba data on the Cheto, Jumada would. Jumeta da Lambuchi Tontoya Yorde Koi, no Nashi Yomarwa, no Tato, don't number mass, Chesumbataro, so Tibotichi.
So here, then we turn next to this section, refuting production via the four alternatives does not refute production per se. So we saw above that there are those who think that if you refute production by these four alternatives, then that would refute production at all in any way. And according to Tsongkhapa, that is not a kind of correct way to understand this. So if things had production by their intrinsic nature, production from their own side, or ultimate production, then they would have to have production from themselves, other, both self and other, or causelessly. So these are the four alternatives introduced in the first verse of Nagarjuna's treatise on the Middle Way, which was cited near the end of the last chapter. As things are not produced from any of those, ultimate production is refuted. And so some extend this, as we saw above, extend this reasoning analyzing the ultimate to say that it also reveals an emptiness that refutes even the mere production of phenomena from causes and conditions. But if this were so, functional things would not be functional, as they would be empty of the ability to produce effects. For, like the son of a barren woman, they would be utterly non-existent. As this would lead to the dire extreme of nihilism, we should avoid this view. And so here, the production we are refuting is the production that seems to exist from its own side, which is how it ordinarily appears to us. It does not truly exist in the way that it appears. Yet composite things perform functions and produce effects, just like magicians' illusions and so forth are able to produce effects. And so here, it's not the case that refuting production from the four alternatives or from the four extremes refutes production per se. Things generally kind of exist, and we can see that this is the reason why the example of an illusion is used. An illusion is something that exists, but it doesn't exist in the way that it appears. If it were the case that there were utterly no production of phenomena whatsoever, then they would use the example of something utterly non-existent, like the son of a barren woman or a sky flower, a rabbit's horn. But here, it's not the case that phenomena are utterly non-existent, but rather they are like illusions. So then in this same vein, the commentary on the 400 stanzas by Chandrakirti again says, Aryadeva means that compounded phenomena lack production because this analysis refutes all forms of production. And the reply to that is that, well, no, that's not correct. In that case, the production of compounded phenomena would not be said to be like a magician's illusion. Rather, we would use examples such as the son of a barren woman to illustrate how production exists. Wary of the absurd implication that dependent arisings would not exist, we avoid such comparisons. Instead, we compare the production of things to a magician's illusion and so forth, examples that do not contradict dependent arising. So here, the example of an illusion is something that exists, but it doesn't, and appears, but it doesn't exist in the way that it appears. And this too is like the production of phenomena. It's not production per se that's being negated, but that kind of production in its own right, objective production that is being negated.
Oh yeah. 다시 째내 줘나 군좀 좀 메로아. 다 지대게 당에도서 간가 공부들이 째고나 공부지지 가봐요래서 하마고는 째지 당제신의 때문에도 때문에서 원디르스 람소나 다 하고 살아. 다 당제셔요. 뭐 공부한다 가들에서는 메디슨 판다 메디스라 공부하고 살아. 대시가래서 하마고서 대신들이다스 메디테 알레 데드시라 오세 다 대시가 그래서 지대 타니엘이야 만디서 다게 좋아르마도 지대 타니엘이 제바체나니 샤야요 말에 대봉고 말에서라 단다디 제바체데 단담도 요나 가디임바세 제바체요 얼마도 지대 타니엘도 강바요나 강바가 그래서제 단단히 제바체요 말에서라 다시 제네 조는 군중 좀 메로와서 네 군중 남샤 롱고 말에 지대 마다 마제바 코라 맹지 따서 다가란 차샤 로고마도 로벨로둘라 소바 오마 텐조 남제 실람 데비 남샤 제바 남메 시스드 히 남샤 템바실라 소바 템바니르서 코라 케시디스오라 메타바레다 가레스 케시데스 시제 lam sudo lam de la tab da shiram ni ora shi temba ni sir ta nam ju che da kunzu ta ta da be temba ni ra o ta da be temba te to ne nyamu ta ta zu shi chi do ra kunzu be temba te le chung de ta chamba da se wala so ba te zu nam sha sha ta da le ti yong go ra shi che lam de la tab shi ni se shirab de tongba ni to ba shirab la so ba shi che ne zu shi be shirab te zu ya shirab si go ra ti ko go ra 탑스도 잠바다 닝지 자와 그러와 샹레 차와 방발라 소보 장주의 셈라 소보 상부 차들이야 탑스고라 저 탑디 상부 차다 시럽 니님도 고요래 시럽 장장 전에는 상부 면에는 골로제 냥가도 무슨 대사로 좀 망부 전다 메다신 아니 벤자불 코라 냥가 소야친디 냥가 요라 그 상부디 메 밀치솔 뉴그레 삼도 삼을 때는 소구마로 당분에 야고 제조를 내가 사고 삼고라 소다 하고도 소샤고라 사티 냥가 첨부래 되어라 다와도 봐 롱범만 보아 텐데 연구도 나절 그 미디 마신게 되 시단 골로제 게 요마로 다신게 도저니 강가 chen 골로제 밀은 거고 다 강가 뛰는 냥가 첨부라 삼바 상부매나 탑던 시럽니 세티래 시럽니 뺏게 첨부래 시럽디 고아로와 개념도 탑상부 차대 지소를 팬바다 너바다 되게 미드도 심지에도 사도나시 임베 삼루티 메고로 오 소소나시 잠바다 차와 초와티도 냥게를 삼도 삼루치요고라 뒤에는 그 삼루 땅이라 대상마다 아니 냥게 첨부에서 탑다 시람니에서 제부들이 아니 가르쳐 시대반에 남태이 제부꾼이 있으라 주부터 수군이 있으라 주구세대 소수 시럽이 차가 소수 강가 시바티 쓰거라 시럽이 차 공부할 때는 꽤 강가 빵 내턴데 시바들에 주구세라테 수구세대 상부 공부할 때는 미치졸 팬터 최송 통계 강사가 남바 때는 미치졸은 파치 수치 나는 제번전에 최송식에도 산제 좀 된데 뭐 수구로 와 어디 상부 연대를 장장 정하네 그 나게 또고 반도 연대 타르시 치료파 미치졸 팬도시에 되고 거라 제부대 저 시tem반이 남탑신이 제부꾼이 있어도 어디시거라 실험 제부 남샤 제바 남네 대코나니라 주베 릭베 마다 마제버 줘바래 좋아 뭐마와 남다 대코나니라 주베 릭베 제네 줘나 주되다 대코나니도 줘밤 더다바 줘바 줘바래 좋아 대다리 조배 쳐 대단히 당에도 여바다 군주도 여바 민주르게스 딱제 전에 라스나 틀어 당에도 여바 시그마르 군주도 여바 시그마르 대단담바 여바 시그래 대 당에 버sam비 샤고 말에 대단담바 지여네 코야 샤고 여바도 대단 조반이 쳐 대단히 당에도 여바다 군주도 여바 민주르게 대코나니라 주베 릭베 제난 지den기 당에 당에도 여베 쳐 강야 좀 미니바르 당에 대다 냠바 유로 이제 주den기 당에 대 마다 맞아 고란 지den을 용수 타고 내가 나신 켈레제 로고를 마도 텔레제바 제 지den에 당에 남사를 말해 텔레제바 제니 제 라와이나 대 던담 바 요러면도 당에도 여바씩 말해 세고라 이거 대치랍니다.
So then we have this next section, which is on the ways of conventions are not feasible if posited after analysis. So here, when it comes to, again, those sorts of prasangika masters, prasangikas such as the master Nagarjuna, present presentations of the basis, the path, and goal without investigating with the reasoning, analyzing the ultimate. So here, when it comes to like the level of sort of conventional understanding, if we say like, oh, that's Tashi, you know, oh, this is a house, and so forth. If someone were to say, oh, really, that's Tashi? Like, where exactly is Tashi? We might kind of think they're crazy. Like, if they're trying to go beyond just the conventions of the world, that might seem like they're a little bit over the top. So here, when it comes to the conventions, the conventional reality is posited with a kind of understanding of the conventional. It isn't something that is posited after investigating into the kind of ultimate reality of things. When we talk about, oh, this is a house, this is Tashi, this is Tundrup, we're not speaking about having analyzed ultimately, but rather understanding them as conventionalities. So here, when it comes to the presentations of the basis, the path, and the goal, here the basis is normally encompassed with a kind of understanding of the four truths and the two levels of truth. Understanding, on the one hand, ultimate truth, the emptiness of phenomena, as well as their kind of conventional level of existence, developing that good side, the kind of love and compassion for others. So again, the basis level of those two truths then leads into the path level of wisdom and compassion, having both method and wisdom. So just having a kind of knowledge of the way that things are isn't sufficient. And we can see this definitely in the world today, that there are those that are pursuing knowledge, pursuing a kind of understanding of the way that things are, but they don't develop simultaneously that side of goodness. And in this way, we can see how people use knowledge as a kind of way to harm or deceive others, because they're only thinking about the knowledge side of things, of like knowing, and they don't have that kind of the method side. So we need to both have method and wisdom. Our kind of understanding of the way that things are and our investigation should be grounded in that kind of compassion or that goodness that doesn't just view others as like rocks or stones, but sees that they're feeling beings. And it is on the basis of that combined practice of method and wisdom that one then gains the goals, the resulting Dharmakaya, the truth body, which sort of comprises the knowledge of a Buddha, as well as the form body, that which allows us to then teach to other sentient beings, to be able to interact and communicate to them the knowledge that we have. So here, for essentialists, getting back to the text, essentialists posit only like the basis, path, and result, or basis, path, and goal only after investigation with the reasoning analyzing the ultimate. But in the latter case, say the Prasangikas, you would have posited those phenomena as ultimately established or established in reality. And as we have seen, phenomena that are posited in this way cannot exist conventionally or nominally. For when you investigate with the reasoning analyzing the ultimate, you are unable to posit any phenomena that exists in the conventions of the world. And these conventionally existent phenomena would then become non-existent. So here, for essentialists, they say that for something to be existent, we need to be able to find it, to be able to say that it really, truly, ultimately exists. Whereas for Prasangikas and Prasangika Madhyamakas, they would say that for something to exist as a conventionality would mean that you don't find it when you analyze using the reasoning, analyzing the ultimate. Conventionally existent phenomena are only conventionally existent because they haven't been sort of analyzed or undermined by that kind of reasoning, analyzing the ultimate.
뭐야? 다들 농장교라. 다시 전에 지된배 타냐 냠도 그래서 대 공장교라. 나와 작배 시계변 대발레스. 넘버 7 전에 지된배 타냐 냠바르교 대세. 지된배 타냐데 가리네 명다서 다가 차샤 오면 될 제바 직되네. 타냐데라요 말해서 거라. 타냐도 요바 차고 말해서 거라. 놀래. 배나 신다 규래 땡셔네세. 담예 단계를 지내 신지요라. 네 tel야 따르든데 봐 당셔라. 네 락베든데 저저저저 세지 동구라. 네 개념부 체체 념부 거야요라. 배나 신다 규래 땡셔네 락바 저와 제바 숨쳐나 락바 전데 신구로 거 락바 야부시네. 담예 념부 용구라. 병화 단계나 거리 단계나 정말 숨쳐나 조지 병화 링부 라서래 조지 병화이나다 링부 단계이나다 대줄에는 자녀부 용구라 용을래 대다 레지 자연 중앙주 자녀부 텐데 중비를 송비와라 대다래 자네 중앙주스 예 근데 개발할래 따져 돼서 어디다 근데 봐들 따져 지기나 근데 자연왕 조anye 면줄쳐라 개발 쪽 따져 지기나 근데 자연왕 근데 개발할래 따져 돼 자연왕 조anye 면줄서 개발할 어디 자녀부 시부지 추서 간에 용도서는 Dinde Tinsan Mambuch Dua Dinde Chera. Titania Budukane Yungure Kare Sena. Tarae Yomara, Tite Yomara, Jide Tanyala. Tanya Budu something Yanza Taga shower mother. Tanya Budu condition with the Kagide, Shini Mare, Tardi Mare, Lavan Marke, Rae Yomara. Oh, this. Kebalale Taja de Tene Kane Hoshika. Tanya Budukane Yungure. Tatanda Kavadore Medua Kavayoresina. Tinde Geshe Yomare, Nyambuchu Nyambusor, Tini Zoda Zosar, Tazor Mother. The Jide Tanyela Geshe Yomara. Choda Chozum Kundu Tachena, Taiwan, Rani Menjus, Choda Chozum Kavadin the Tagi Tanyambuti, Raya Yomare Shera. Shedasa. Shayan Judi, the Umajube, Devana like the Dedu. Devana Lovio Namji. Penzu teba samju trube kune trube number shabat jados. Uma tenju aga penzu chichila tene. Ani truba de number shabat. Tende truba la tene te yeba number shavi wade chera. Penzu teba altene. Truba de te namshaje wadese. Tene te kona dar teme sao ke lambar chade. O te daga nashi. Uma tenju wasya nashi. Penzu tene namshachi te ke lankure sera. Toda maina kunzu teba dan demba minjurosi. Te maina ne kunzu tutu shaju mata majeba tanya shaju mambuji jotu marese. Tewe na te kona ngido. Tena te kona ngido njurgi kunzu tu minjuro. Cheba chene chene rani shagdene te tanya do yoba sigmare. Tanya do yoba se tanya je wangi namsha chesha bishkuara. Tanya je wangi namsha chesha membuji chene chiran diri sechu na. Rangwine truba tendamba truba namshari maso tanya yuwanga shagwa riyo mare. Tanya yuwanga shagwa maimba yu rangwine yoba yora. Te kona nyi do joji kunzu do minjuro ose. Shibata ose ya o te chilana.
So here, then continuing in the text, it says here, as Chandrakirti states in his explanation of entering the middle way, when you use analysis, the conventions of the world are destroyed. So here, if you're trying to subject these conventional designations to analysis of the ultimate, they would be destroyed. So as it says in the sutras, for instance, when the three come together, the moving hand and the instrument's wood and strings, they produce a sound arising from the instrument, the lute, flute, and so on. So when you have like a dranyan, some kind of guitar or something like that, and a skilled musician can make beautiful music. But if you then get some sort of a scholar who comes along and tries to find, and we find there are those who are trying to do this these days, they're trying to find, like, well, where is that sound coming from? So then some scholars analyze this, saying, from where does this come and to where does it go? When they investigate in all the cardinal and intermediate directions, they do not find the coming or going of sound. And so here, when someone tries to search for that thing, this kind of noise, this beautiful noise as they are hearing it, they can't actually find that thing. You can't point to it like as existing in the strings of the instrument or in the hands of the musicians, but rather it's something that came about due to those aggregation of causes and conditions. It's only contingently existent, but something that is fundamentally existent in and of itself is not to be found when you go through this kind of analysis. So if someone were to look for it saying, well, where does it come from? Where does it go? You can't actually find that thing. And so too, Chandrakirti's clear words states, therefore, the master is presented as being established from the perspective of existing by mere interdependence. So like that beautiful sound, it exists only through that mere interdependence. We assert this without any doubt, just as it is. Were it otherwise, either conventional phenomena would not be possible, or they would be ultimately established, but not conventionally existent. So here, if it were the case that you had to be able to find something that were that conventional thing, then actually conventional phenomena would not be possible, and they would be then ultimately existent, as in, oh, I can find that thing, it's ultimately established, and then they're no longer conventionally existent. So conventionally existent means existent only due to the power of convention. And if there were some kind of existence beyond that, or you could point to something, that would mean that they would be ultimately established but not conventionally existent.
Oh yeah, that is true. Oh yeah.
So we'll stop there as the time is up for today.
Thank you, Genrin Mache. And thank you, Katrina, for your skillful
Yeah.
translations. And for those watching online, we have one more session with Genla in this series of teachings. And so we hope you'll join us again next Saturday at 8 a.m. Pacific time. We'll finish with some dedication prayers. Due to this May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Losang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niyatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.